All right, we are back. This time we are reading the program of the Blanquist Fugitives from the Paris Commune by Engels. A reminder, Blankism is the belief that a working class revolution is possible by way of a group of secretive saboteurs, more or less, gets together and in silence on behalf of the working class seizes power. And this could be through plot in the form of a coup, or it could be through uh, revolutionary adventurism, doing assassinations and terrorism and all sorts of stuff like that. Marx and Engels, and I know Lenin, I'm certain basically everybody else was fundamentally against this stance. And in addition, it also became kind of a phrase for a particular way of thinking about working class movements in general. So Mao, for example, critiqued various trends in the movement for their stances on how to engage in militant action as Blanquist thought. So, kind of separated from its historical existence and framed within the concept of being separate from the people. There are claims that the Vanguard Party is a Blanquist methodology. Lenin has many works refuting that I suggest you read in case you're worried or confused about that. So, with that said, let's get started. Reminder, we are looking for things in regards to the dictatorship of the proletariat. It should be the last thing that we read today. After the failure of every revolution or counter-revolution, a feverish activity develops among the fugitives who escaped to foreign countries. The parties of different shades form groups, accuse each other of having driven the cart into the mud, charge one another with treason and every conceivable sin. At the same time, they remain in close touch with the home country, organize, conspire, print leaflets and newspapers, swear that the trouble will start afresh within 24 hours, that victory is certain, and distribute the various government offices beforehand on the strength of this anticipation. Of course, disappointment follows disappointment, and since it is not attributed to the inevitable historical conditions, which they refuse to understand, but rather to the accidental mistakes of individuals, the mutual accusations multiply, and the whole business winds up with a grand row. This is a history of all fugitives, groups of fugitives, from the royalist immigrants of 1792 until the present day. These fugitives, who have any sense and understanding, retire from the fruitless squabble as soon as they can do so with propriety, devote themselves to better things. The French immigrants after the Commune did not escape this disagreeable fate. Owing to the European campaign of slander which attacked every way without distinction, and compelled particularly in London, where they had a common center in the General Council of the International Workingmen's Association, for the time being, to suppress their internal troubles before the world, they had not been able, during the last 2 years, to conceal the signs of advancing disintegration. The open fight broke out everywhere. In Switzerland, a party joined the Baconists, prime mainly under the influence of Milan, who was himself one of the founders of the Secret Alliance. Then the so-called Blanquists in London withdrew from the Internationale and formed a group of their own under the title of the Revolutionary Commune. Outside them was numerous other groups arose later, which continued in a state of ceaseless transformation and modulation and have not put out anything essential in the way of manifestos. But the Blanquists are just making their program known to the world by a proclamation to the Commune. And I apologize, I forgot to share a link for anybody who wants to comment. These Blanquists are not called by this name because they are a group founded by Blanqui, only a few of the 33 signers of this program have ever spoken personally to Blanqui. They rather wish to express the fact that they intend to be active in his spirit and according to his traditions. Blanqui is essentially a political revolutionist. He is a socialist only through sentiment, through his sympathy with the sufferings of the people, but he has neither a socialist theory nor any definite practical suggestion for social remedies. In his political activity, he was mainly a, quote, man of action, believing that a small and well-organized minority who would attempt a political stroke of force at the opportune moment could carry the mass of the people with them by a few successes at the start and thus make a victorious revolution. Of course, he could organize such a group under Louis Philippe's reign only as a secret society. Then the thing, which generally happens in the case of conspiracies, naturally took place. His men, tired of being held off at all times by empty promises that the outbreak should soon begin, finally lost all patience, became rebellious, and only the alternative method remained of either letting the conspiracy fall to pieces or breaking loose without any apparent provocation. They made a revolution on May 12, 1839, and were promptly squelched. By the way, this Blanquist conspiracy was the only one in which the police could never get a foothold. The blow fell out of a clear sky. From Blanqui's assumption, in other words, they started it with no basis. They jumped at shadows and then they started a revolution and nobody gave a shit. The police didn't even, recognize that it was really going on in any sense because they didn't have any force behind them. And I'm going to copy and paste this as, what not to do. From Blanqui's assumption that any revolution may be made by the outbreak of a small revolutionary minority follows of itself the necessity of a dictatorship after the success of the venture. This is, of course, not a dictatorship, not of the entire revolutionary class, the proletariat, but of the small minority that has made the revolution, and who are themselves previously organized under the dictatorship of one or several individuals. So, right here, we see that Engels is recognizing the capacity of such a thing to exist. We see then that Blanqui is a revolutionary of the preceding generation. These conceptions of the march of revolutionary events have long become obsolete, at least for the German Workers' Party, and will not find much sympathy in France, except among the less mature or the more impatient laborers. We shall also note that they are placed under certain restrictions in the present program. Nevertheless, our London Blanquists agree with the principle that revolutions do not make themselves, but are made, that they are made by a relatively small minority and after a previously conceived plan, and finally, that they may be made at any time and that soon, quote unquote. It is a matter of course that such principles will deliver a man hopelessly in the hands of all the self-deceptions of fugitive's life, and drive him from one folly to another. He wants to above all play the role of Blanqui, the man of action. But little can be accomplished by mere goodwill. Not everyone has the revolutionary instinct and quick decision of Blanqui. Hamlet may talk ever so much energy, but will still remain Hamlet. If our 33 men of action cannot find anything at all to do upon what they call the field of action, then these 33 Brutuses come into a more comical than tragic conflict with themselves. The tragic of their situation is by no means increased by the dark men which they assume, as though they were not so many slayers of tyrants with stilettos in their bosom, which they are not. What can they do? They prepare for the next quote-unquote outbreak by drawing up lists of prescription for the future, in order that the line of men who took part in the Commune may be purified. For this reason they are called the pure by the other fugitives. Whether they themselves assumed this title, I cannot say. It would fit some of them rather badly. Their meetings are secrets, and their resolutions are supposed to be kept secret. although this does not all prevent the whole French quarter from ringing them next morning. And as always happens to men of action that have done nothing to do, they became involved first in a personal and then literary quarrel with a foe worthy of themselves, one of the most doubtful of the minor Parisian journalists, a certain Vermersch, who published during the Commune the Paris Commune, a miserable caricature of the paper published by Haber in 1793. This noble creature replies to their moral indignation by calling all of them thieves or accomplices of thieves in some leaflet, and smothering them with a flood of Billingsgate that smells of the dung heap. Every word is an excrement. And it is with such opponents our 33 Bruces wrestle before the public. If anything is evident, it is the fact that the Parisian proletariat, after the exhausting war, after the famine in Paris, and especially after the fearful masses in May 1871, will require a good deal of time to rest, in order to gather new strength, and that every premature attempt at revolution would bring on merely a new and still more crushing defeat. Our Blanquists are of a different opinion. The rout of the royalist majority in Versailles forebodes them to, quote, the fall of Versailles, the revenge of the Commune, for we are approaching one of those great historical moments, one of those great crises in which the people, while seemingly sunk in misery and doomed to death, resume their revolutionary advance in new strength, end quote. In other words, another outbreak will soon come. This hope for an immediate revenge of the Commune, it's not mere illusion of the fugitives, but a necessary article of faith with men who have their minds set upon being men of action, at the time when there is absolutely nothing to be done in the sense which they represent to have an immediate outbreak. Never mind. Since the start will be made soon, they hold that, quote, the time has come when every fugitive who still has any life in him should declare himself. And so the 33 declare that they are 1. Atheists, 2. Communists, 3. Revolutionaries. Our Blanquists have nothing in common with the Baconists, and that they wish to represent the most advanced, most extreme line. For this reason, they often choose the same means as the Baconists, although they differ from them in their aims. The point with them is, then, to be more radical in the matter of atheism than all others. Fortunately, it requires no great heroism to be an atheist nowadays. Atheism is practically accepted by the European working men's parties, although in certain countries it may at times be of the same caliber as that in a certain Bakunin, who declared that it was contrary to all socialism to believe in God. But it was different with the Virgin Mary, in whom every good socialist ought to believe. Of the vast majority of the German socialist working men, it may be even said that mere atheism has been outgrown by them. This purely negative term does not apply to them anymore, for they maintain no longer merely a theoretical, but rather practical opposition to belief in God. They are simply done with God. They live and think in the real world, for they are materialists. This will probably be the case in France also. Though if it were not, then nothing would be easier than to see it to it that the splendid French materialist literature of the preceding century is widely distributed among the laborers. That literature in which the French mind has so far accomplished its best for form and content, and which, with due allowance for the condition of the science of their day, still stands infinitely high in content, while its form has never been equaled since. But this cannot suit our Blanquists. In order to show that they are the most radical, God is abolished by them by decree, as it is in 1793. Quote, may the Commune forever free humanity from the ghosts of past misery, God, or the cause of its present misery, the non-existing God a cause. There is no room for the Commune for priests. Every religious demonstration, every religious organization must be forbidden. And this demand for transformation of people into atheists by order of the Star Chamber is signed by 2 members of the Commune, who had opportunity enough to learn in the first place then the multitude of things may be ordered on paper without being carried out. In the second place, that persecutions are the best means of promoting disliked convictions. So much is certain that the only service which may still be rendered to God today is that of declaring atheism as an article of faith to be enforced and outdoing even Bismarck's anti-Catholic laws by forbidding religion altogether. This is a pretty funny bit. The second part of the program is communism. Here we are more at home, for the ship in which we sail here is called, quote, the Manifesto of the Communist Party, published in February 1848. Already in the fall of 1872, the five Blanquists who withdrew from the Internationale had adopted a socialist program, which is in all essential points that of the present German communism. They had justified their withdrawal by the fact that the Internationale refused to play at revolution making after the manner of these five. Now this Council of 33 adopts this program with its entire materialist conception of history. Although its translation into Blanquist French leaves a good deal to desire, in parts where the Manifesto has not been almost literally adopted, as it has, for instance, in the following passage, quote, as the last expression of all forms of servitude, the bourgeoisie has lifted the mystic veil from the exploitation of labor, by which it was formerly obscured. Government, religions, law, families, laws, institutions of the past and present finally reveal themselves into society, reduced to simple antagonism between capitalist and wage worker as instruments of oppression, by the help of which the bourgeoisie maintains its rule and holds the proletariat down. So remember when I was talking earlier about sectarianism and what Marx had to say and the critique of the Gotha program. He said that essentially what's important for making alliances and joining in with other parties is that you only join in if they are not sectarian, if they will allow you to propagandize and publicize your views and challenge their own within their party. That is all that is demanded. If they do not, then you shouldn't join them because you will only find yourself losing any development. In an actual equal relationship wherein working men can come into communion, so to speak, an association, you should have no fear of them propagandizing within your own party because you should have the right of it, and if you don't, then your position should be improved, right? Now, of course, as we know, you want to maintain good faith, right? That's a lot of what the server does. It's like you have to be in good faith. Here are the rules for engagement, so on and so forth. But let's get back to the text. Compare with this the Communist Manifesto, Section 1. In a word, for exploitation veiled by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborers. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil and has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation, etc. End quote. But as soon as we descend from theory to practice, the peculiarity of the 33 manifests itself here. Quote, we are communists because we want to reach our goal without stopping at any intermediate stations, at compromises which merely defer the victory and prolong the slavery. End quote. The German communists are communists because they clearly see the final goal and work towards it through all intermediate stations and compromises which are created not by them, but by historical development. And their goal is the abolition of classes, the inauguration of a society in which no private property in land and means of production shall exist any longer. The 33, on the other hand, are communists because they imagine that they can skip intermediate stations and compromises at their sweet will. And if only the trouble begins, as it will soon according to them, and they get hold of the affairs, then communism will be introduced the day after tomorrow. If this is not immediately possible, then they are not communists. What a simple-hearted childishness, which quotes impatience as a convincing argument in support of a theory. Finally, the 33 are quote-unquote revolutionaries. But this line, so far as big words are concerned, we know that the Bacunists have reached the limit, but the Blanquists feel that it is their duty to excel them in this. And how do they do this? It is well known that the entire socialist proletariat, from Lisbon to New York and Budapest to Belgrade, has assumed the responsibility for the actions of the Paris Commune without hesitation. But that is not enough for the Blanquists. Quote, as for us, we claim our part of the responsibility for the executions of the enemies of the people by the Commune, whose names are then enumerated. Quote, we claim our part of the responsibility for those fires which destroyed the instruments of royal or bourgeois oppression or protected our fighters. In every revolution where some follies are inevitably committed, just as they are at any other time, and when quiet is finally restored and calm reasoning comes, people necessarily conclude, we have done many things which had better left been undone. We have neglected many things which we should have done, and for this reason things went wrong. This is a great quote right here, responding to many criticisms. But what a lack of judgment it requires to declare the commune sacred, to proclaim it infallible, to claim that every burnt house, every executed hostage receive their just dues to the dots over the I's. Is that not the equivalent to saying that during the week in May, the people shot just as many opponents as were necessary and no more, and burnt just those buildings which had to be burnt and no more? Does not repeat the saying about the first French Revolution? Every beheaded victim received justice. First was beheaded by the order of Robespierre, and then Robespierre himself. To such follies are people driven. And when they receive given free rein to the desire to appear formidable, although they are at bottom quite good-natured. I'm reminded of that amazing video where it's like Stalin killed my grandfather, and it's like Stalin would have killed your grandfather if he didn't deserve it. Oh man. Enough. In spite of all follies of the fugitives, and in spite of all comical efforts to appear terrible, this program shows some progress. It is the first manifesto in which French working men endorse the present German communism. And these are moreover working men of that caliber, who consider the French as the chosen people of the revolution, and Paris as the revolutionary Jerusalem. To have carried them to this point is the undeniable merit of Valiant, who is one of the signers of the signers of the manifesto, and who is well known to be thoroughly familiar with the German language and the German socialist literature. The German socialist working man, on the other hand, who proved in 1870 that they are completely free from jingoism, may regard it as a good sign that the French working men adopt correct theoretical principles, even when they come from Germany. These backhanded compliments, as usual. Thank you, Engels. All right. So, what did we learn from this piece? We learned about Blankism. We learned that Engels does see the possibility wherein under a Blankist seizure of power, there could be a dictatorship of a small minority that made the revolution, who were previously organized under the dictatorship of one or several individuals. In addition, there's a bit of talk about it being not so hot of an idea to immediately ban, religion, going in kind of in the same stance that Marx had, for example, on the abolition of inheritance and so on and so forth, right? The next thing is that we learn that the goal of communists is fundamentally, of real communists, is fundamentally the that we have the final goal in mind, right? And we work through it through all the intermediate stages and compromises. And that these stages and compromises are not created by people, but are created by historical development. Goal of communists is the abolition of classes and the inauguration of a society in which no private property in land and means of production exists any longer. And also some discussion on immediacy, on, essentially all the complaints about there being a oh, blood is spilled during the revolution. Okay, yeah. Wow. Nobody could have ever guessed that. It's almost as if revolutions generally only happen when the alternative to death is worse, and that the ruling powers deny people the ability to achieve revolution through peaceful ends. So anybody who's, just saying, oh, well, you're evil for have been doing that because your hands are stained with blood. It's like, my body has been stained with blood from being stabbed over and over again. When I finally defend myself, and now you start complaining about the violence. But also, Engels does note that it would be very much improper to simply declare that every action was justified, and that everything went as planned. That only alienates people because these things are bloody and terrible affairs. We're trying to end the necessity for such things. Sometimes to put away the gun, one must take it up. That's some Black Panther mangled quote for you right there. With that said, we have successfully gotten through the 4 works we were aiming for today. And I'm going to sign off the recording. Thanks for everybody who listened to all 4 that I'm going to upload shortly.